1958, a dust-colored town called Dry Wells, New Mexico. The kind of place that shows up on maps because the railroad needed a water stop, not because anyone planned to stay. The morning freight comes in 3 hours behind schedule, brakes screaming against rust, and in the last car, wedged between crates of machine parts and mail sacks, rides a flag-covered casket. Inside it, Private First Class Thomas Early, killed 2 years earlier during the final, ugly weeks of the Korean conflict. It has taken the United States government 24 months to bring him the last 400 miles home. Waiting on the platform is his widow. Her name is Coralie Early, 26 years old, wearing a coat that belonged to her mother because she never got around to buying black of her own. She has been a widow longer than she was ever a wife, and this morning, she is about to learn that grief does not automatically come with permission. Here is that story. The depot at Dry Wells is nothing to look at. A plank building with a tin roof, a loading dock on one side, a water tower standing over it all like a tired sentry. Coralie stands near the dock with her hands folded around a small drawstring purse, and inside that purse are $11.40, every bit of it saved from a waitressing job at the diner 2 blocks over. She has been told there will be a fee. She does not know for what. She has brought the money anyway, because in her experience, when the government wants something, it wants money, and she has learned not to ask questions that only cost her time she does not have. Thomas Early grew up on a sheep ranch outside of town, the second of 4 boys, and he was the one who could fix any engine and never finished a sentence without a joke buried somewhere in it. He and Coralie married in the fall of 1950, 3 weeks before his unit shipped for the Pacific. They had less than a year together as husband and wife. Most of it lived through letters, since he was overseas within a month of the wedding. He wrote her on whatever paper he could scrounge, the backs of ration cards, torn corners of newspaper, once an entire letter on the inside of a cigarette carton, because that was all he had. She still has every scrap of it folded into a hatbox on her closet shelf. He died on a hillside she has never been able to find on any map in a battle whose name she has heard exactly once, from an officer reading off a clipboard in a voice built for delivering bad news efficiently. And then for 2 full years, the machinery of the military went quiet. No updates, no timeline. Just the occasional form letter reminding her that remains repatriation is proceeding according to established protocol. Language built she has come to believe specifically so that no one ever has to write the word husband. Now the waiting is over, or so she believes. The train is here, the box is here. All that stands between Coralie Early and the last thing she will ever get to do for her husband is a freight clerk with a ledger and a very particular idea of what his job requires of him. The clerk's name does not matter to this story, so we will just call him the clerk, the way Coralie will remember him for the rest of her life. Not as a villain, just as an obstacle wearing a green eye shade. He works behind a half door at the edge of the dock, a ledger open in front of him, a pencil tucked behind one ear like it has grown there. He is, by every account that survives from that town, a decent man. He is also, on this particular morning, an immovable one. There's a release form that's supposed to come with military remains. He tells her not unkindly, but not warmly either. Signed by an officer. Yours isn't here. I have money, Coralie says, and she opens her purse right there on the dock, counting out bills with fingers that will not quite hold still. Whatever the fee is, it's not about the fee, ma'am. He taps the ledger with the pencil, a small final gesture. It's about the signature. Without it, I can't release government property. I don't have the authority. That's my husband. That's not government property. It is until somebody signs for it being anything else. He does not look up when he says this. I don't write the rules, I just have to follow them, same as anybody. Down at the far end of the platform, a different train, the westbound, running the opposite direction, stopped briefly to take on water and passengers, sits idling. And stepping off it to stretch legs gone stiff from 2 days in a coach seat is a tall man in a canvas coat, hat pulled low against the wind. He is an actor, though not one whose name anyone on this platform would recognize instantly. A journeyman of Western pictures, the kind of face audiences trusted without necessarily remembering. On his way to a location shoot 2 states over. We will call him Wade Coulter, because every story needs a name to hang its weight on, even one that belongs, technically, only to itself. He steps down onto the platform planning to buy a cup of coffee and get back on his train. Instead, he stops, because something about the scene in front of him refuses to let him keep walking. If you're watching this from somewhere far from where this story is set, Drop your state or country below. I want to know how far a quiet act of decency can travel. Wade does not walk over right away. That is not how he operates, on set or off it. He has spent enough years standing just outside of frame, waiting for his cue to have developed an instinct for reading a scene before he steps into it. He watches the wind cut at the hem of Coralie's coat. He watches her count the same bills twice, as if a third look might change the answer. He watches the clerk turn a page in his ledger, like the conversation is already finished. He has stood near this kind of grief before, not this exact grief, not this exact woman, but its shape is familiar to him. He has spent long stretches of his career playing men who came home from wars and other men who did not, and he has learned, in the space between action and cut, what real loss looks like when the cameras aren't rolling and nobody is going to yell for a second take. There is no mark on this platform, no directors standing off to the side, just a widow, a coffin, a clerk with a rule book, and wind that does not care whose story this is. The conductor on Wade's train calls out that they'll be moving again in 15 minutes. 15 minutes is plenty of time to finish a coffee and get back aboard. Nothing on this platform is his business. He does not know this woman's name. He never met her husband. There is no reasonable version of this morning in which staying makes any sense at all. He stays anyway. Coralie sets her money on the ledge of the half door. "Please," she says, "I'll sign anything. I'm his wife. There's no one else." A wife's signature isn't what the form calls for, ma'am. The clerk says it like a man reciting scripture. He didn't write but has come to respect. Has to be an officer of record. "Bring me that signature. I'll hand him right over." That's the whole of it. She does not cry. That is the detail that finally moves Wade off the rail he has been leaning against. She does not cry, she just stands there with her gloved hands resting on the counter, staring at the long shape under the flag like she is trying to memorize it before someone takes it away again. 2 years of waiting, and it all comes down to a missing signature on a Tuesday morning in a town most maps don't bother to name. The flag draped over the coffin lifts slightly in the wind, one corner rising and falling like it's breathing. Wade walks the length of the platform, boots loud against the boards, and takes his hat off before he says a word. "This your husband?" he asks. Coralie turns. She does not recognize him. There is no reason she should. Picture recognition was never his strong suit, even in his own hometown. "Thomas," she says. "Korea, 1956. They're telling me I can't take him." Wade turns to the clerk. "What's holding this up? And you'd be?" The clerk asks, more curious than hostile. The clerk explains it again, patiently, the way a man explains something he has explained 100 times before and expects to explain 100 times again. The form, the counter-signature, the $11.40 sitting untouched on the ledge. He is not cruel. He has processed more of these boxes than he can count, and every single one of them came correctly signed. And the rules are, in his mind, the only thing standing between an orderly dock and complete chaos. Wade listens to the whole explanation without interrupting. When it's finished, he asks the clerk to read him the actual rule, word for word. The clerk does, something to the effect of, "Military remains released to next of kin upon confirmation by a commissioned officer, fees settled in full." "She's next of kin," Wade says. "She's not an officer." "No," Wade agrees, "she's a widow. That's a rank too, just not one anybody prints on paper. Have you ever stood at a door that would not open, holding everything you had, and been told it wasn't the right kind of everything? It does something to a person, teaches them that the world keeps its promises in fine print, if it keeps them at all." Wade puts his hat back on and looks past the dock toward the water tower and the flat brown hills beyond it, doing a kind of arithmetic the clerk cannot see. Not numbers, names. He is going through the men he has come to know over the years, Army liaisons who consulted on pictures, veterans who worked as extras and stuntmen, officers he'd shared a drink with after a long day of shooting. Somewhere in that list is a name that still owes him a favor, or is owed one by him. In this business, it usually works out to about the same thing. "Where's your telephone?" he asks the clerk. "That's railroad property. I'll pay for the call." He could have let it go here. He could have set a $5 bill on the counter, tipped his hat to the widow, and climbed back aboard his own train, and it would have been a kindness, a small one, forgettable by the following week. Instead, he walks into the cramped station office and picks up the receiver, and the clerk, listening through the half-open door, catches only fragments, a base name, a rank, a request spoken evenly, without heat. Wade gives his own name once, plainly, the way a man does when the name itself is meant to do some of the work. Then a long stretch of listening. Then she's standing right here today, He reads off the depot's number and hangs up. He comes back out, leans against the dock, and waits. He does not explain any of it to Coralie. "Who was that?" she asks. "Somebody who owes a debt or two," Wade says. "Same as most of us, one way or another." That's all he offers. He does not tell her about the years spent on military bases for research, or the friendships built with men who wore the uniform for real instead of on a soundstage, or the fact that a calm voice attached to a recognizable name can sometimes move paperwork faster than a month of polite letters ever could. He simply leans there, watching the road, letting the wind fill in the silence. The westbound train Wade arrived on begins loading without him. He doesn't glance at it once. 8 minutes pass. The office telephone rings, the clerk answers, listens, says yes sir twice, and writes something down. When he hangs up, he looks at the coffin differently than he had a few minutes before. The way anyone looks at something once they've been reminded what it actually is, instead of what paperwork has been calling it. Duty officer wired it through. The clerk says, "It's cleared. I can release him." Coralie reaches for her money again. Wade sets 2 fingers on the bills and slides them gently back toward her. "Keep it," he says. Then to the clerk, "And waive whatever handling fee you've got written down." The clerk doesn't argue. Waived. There is, however, no wagon to carry the casket to the cemetery. The funeral home never sent one, because they too were waiting on the same form that had trapped the box on the dock in the first place. The cemetery sits half a mile up the road. The wind is picking up, sweeping down off the hills with the kind of insistence that suggests it isn't going anywhere soon. Wade takes off his coat. "Give me a hand here," he says to the nearest porter. They lift the casket together. Wade takes the front corner. A brakeman walking by sets down his lantern and steps in without a word. Then a rancher in town to ship a load of cattle leaves his paperwork on a fence post and joins them. Then the clerk himself comes out from behind his half door. Ledger left open on the counter. Careful rules left behind with it. 5 men and 1 widow walking alongside carry Thomas Early up the road toward the cemetery gate. No band, no wagon, just boots against packed dirt, a flag snapping against the wood, and a woman finally allowed to walk beside her husband instead of standing at a distance from him. Nobody gave an order for any of it. That is the detail. Coralie will still be turning over in her mind decades later. How the porter simply saw and came. How the brakeman abandoned his post without being asked. How a cattle rancher set aside business that mattered to his own livelihood. How the very clerk who had refused release 20 minutes earlier ended up with his hands under the same wood, shaking harder than Coralie's ever had. The road climbs gently. Wind pushes at the men from the side, snapping the flag's edges. Halfway up, a farmer driving a feed truck slows, then stops entirely, engine idling, hat removed, waiting in respectful silence until the procession passes. An elderly woman on a porch rises from her rocking chair without a word. By the time the group reaches the cemetery gate, most of Dry Wells has heard, one way or another, that the early boy has finally come home and that strangers carried him the last stretch of the way. Wade carries the front corner, the entire half mile without once asking to be relieved. He is not a young man by this point in his life, and a coffin carries more weight than its measurements suggest. Grief always adds pounds that scales can't register, but he does not falter. At the cemetery gate, the group sets the casket down beside a grave already dug that morning, on the strength of nothing but hope that today would finally be the day. The flag is lifted and folded, 13 careful folds, corner to corner, until nothing remains but a tight blue triangle with the stars showing. None of the men present are certain how it's properly done, except Wade, whose hands move through the process slowly, precisely, the way someone moves who learned it once, somewhere, and never mentioned where. He finishes the final tuck, turns and places the folded flag directly into Coralie's waiting hands. He came home, Wade says, 3 words, nothing more. Then he steps back, out of the space that belongs to her and no one else, because this is not his grief to occupy. Only one he was willing to help carry the last stretch of the way. The casket is lowered. The men stand bareheaded against the wind. No one present is a chaplain, so no one speaks over the grave, and somehow the silence fits the moment better than any words could have. Coralie holds the flag against her chest with both hands, the same way she once held a 4-year-old telegram, as though it too might be taken from her. It is not taken from her. For once, something is allowed to stay. By the time she thinks to turn and thank the stranger properly, he is already at the gate, shrugging his coat back over his shoulders. No statement. No name given to a reporter, because there wasn't one there to give it to. He simply puts his coat on. walks back down the half-mile he'd just carried a casket up, and boards a later train heading the direction he'd originally been going. Coralie never learned his name that day. She found it out roughly 3 weeks later, when someone in town finally placed the face from a picture playing at the local theater. She never wrote to him. She had no address to send anything to, but she kept the flag. For nearly 40 years, it stayed folded inside a cedar box at the foot of her bed, wrapped in tissue paper, through 2 moves and a small house on the edge of town and a long, quiet life that never quite refilled the space Thomas had left in it. She never remarried. She raised their daughter alone, a girl born in the spring of 1957, months after her father's death, who grew up hearing the story of the stranger at the depot, and like most children hearing a tale that sounds too neat to be entirely true, only half believed it. Coralie worked behind the counter of a hardware store for over 3 decades, the kind of quietly essential person a small town depends on without ever quite noticing. Every year, on the anniversary of Thomas's burial, she drove out to the cemetery, brought the flag with her, sat with it a while, and folded it back into its cedar box when she returned home. Year after year, the same folded triangle, carried out and carried back by hands that aged while the stars sewn into the fabric never did. She never once unfolded it completely. Some part of her seemed to be saving that moment for later, though she couldn't have said what she was waiting for. Coralie Early passed away in the early 1990s. She was laid to rest beside Thomas, up the same road from the depot where strangers had once carried him home against the wind. At her graveside stood her grandson, dressed in his own army uniform, the folded flag brought from the house tucked carefully under one arm. After the service ended and the other mourners had returned to their cars, he sat alone in the small chapel and unfolded it completely for the first time in decades. The way you unfold something you intend to fold right back, just to hold it once, all the way open. A small card slipped out from between the folds. Yellowed with age, the pencil markings pressed firm enough to have survived nearly 40 years in the dark. Ma'am, a man isn't finished being carried while someone still remembers to carry him. Your husband was carried home by strangers who never knew his name and were glad to do it. So were you, W.C. Her grandson didn't recognize the initials. His mother did. She had grown up on this story her entire life and never fully believed it. Not the stranger on the platform, not the phone call, not the half-mile walk into the wind. She believed every word of it now. It had been folded into that flag the whole time, waiting quietly in the dark alongside the stars. Has anyone ever told you, years too late, that you were carried through something you thought you'd faced entirely alone? A person can leave money on a counter and tip a hat and call that generosity. Or a person can take off his coat, lift the weight himself, walk the whole distance, fold the flag with his own 2 hands, and tuck a few private words where no one will find them for 40 years. One of those is charity. The other is closer to the truth of who somebody really is. If this one landed with you, pass it along, especially to anyone who served or waited for someone who did. And if you want more stories like this, quiet ones about people who show up when nobody's asking them to stick around, there are more coming.